all set. Laura, you about ready to go? All right, guys, it's 7:01. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. If you could all please rise and join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the December 6th meeting minutes, please.
I'll make a motion.
Heather, do I have a second? By Janelle. Any errors, changes, otherwise?
She's been busy, I didn't read it.
Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as presented?
Aye.
We're unanimous, thank you. We have a correspondence folder this evening?
We do. This evening, we have an article on Andrew Duval, who's one of our high school student athletes who was named the Gatorade Player of the Year for football, which is an incredible honor. So many congratulations to Andrew and his family. We have a update on the Bartlett media posting. We had fourth graders at our state capitol, and I believe they had the opportunity to meet with Representative Burt. We have some pictures of the middle school gym floor that has been completed. And lastly, we have some information from Mountain View. They had done a hour of code. This was an initiative that the Commissioner of Education had brought forward, and I thought it was a terrific idea, where kids were doing all kinds of coding puzzles. They were using binary code to make bracelets and all kinds of pretty interesting creative things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commendations, good news.
Last Wednesday was the Sliders fundraiser for Ashley Lynch. I was unable to attend, but from what I had heard from some of my friends that were able to go and help run the event, it ran pretty smoothly, and I believe they raised a little bit over $200 that night. Had some raffles for some great items, and there's also the pancake breakfast, which is coming up January 13th. It's a similar thing, except all proceeds for that will go towards Ashley, and that will be held here at the high school.
Great. And great work to Stuco, too,
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
their
and all the
their
other clubs too.
initiatives.
Yeah. No, it's-
And they're doing a canned food drive this week, right?
Yep, I was gonna say that's what
To benefit the food pantry?
Yep.
What are the themes, Jack? Do you know?
I looked
Is
at
every
the-
day a theme? Like, is there peanut butter and jelly day? and-
No, so that used to be, I think like 2 years ago we had that. However, I think last year we decided to just have like a list of most wanted items.
Mhm.
I believe I have that.
No worries if you don't know it. I didn't
Yeah,
know if
the
you
most
knew off
wanted
the
items
top.
that we have are just tuna, fruit, veggies, peanut butter, jelly, soup, mac and cheese, and baked beans. And those just count towards more. It's what the food pantry kind of needs a bit more, as well as money.
Mhm.
So on throughout the entire fundraiser, which lasts 2 weeks, those count as more points towards our goal. And then Wednesdays and Fridays we have dollar days, and dollars count towards more.
Nice. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Any other commendations, good news? Go ahead, Heather.
Two things. One, I went to the Mountain View Concert Orchestra Band a week and a half ago, and I was impressed by how well all those kids were, and the music department, kudos to them. They weren't able to do a lot of work together, training together, practicing, some till just that day, and it was amazing. And I also saw the new gym floor. Very nice. Got a lot of compliments from the kids and parents. A little stinky in there, but it's all good. Looks beautiful. So great job.
Great, thank you. Anything else? All right, seeing none, I will open the floor to public comment. Do we have public comment tonight? Okay, so as we get started, I just want to invite you to come to the table. I just would like to refer anybody else who would like to do public comment. You do have our policy on the back that you can refer to on the agenda. We do limit our public comment to 3 minutes. I do ask everybody to remain respectful, but other than that, if you could please come to the table and you'll state your name and your address for the record.
Yep, my name is Barbara Dexter. I live at 36 Center Street, Goffstown, New Hampshire. And I guess I'm sitting here wondering, when I watch kayaks being taken from the special ed kids, blueberry picking taken away, how in God's name could you lose $10 million? Not that you lost it. How does it sit in a bank account? Well, those special ed kids lost services, and it was growing interest in a bank account, and none of us knew about it. The other thing, as a taxpayer, this has gone on since 2011. I don't think that you should be looking forward to what you do with that money. I think you owe it behind. I have a hard time leaving $10 million with people that can't remember that it's there. This was supposed to be tax relief since 2011. Some of us are on a very fixed income. I'd like to know how many people were hurt by not being able to get that relief. That relief should have been coming every year or whenever, but it never came. I think you owe it to the people who paid that money out to give the money back to them. We don't need to wait and go forward. I think that the people who paid it deserve to have that relief, and I think that we need to be honest. How in God's name could you forget where you put $10 million? How can any of you in this room, not just one person, because that's an error, $10 million? If you went into your bank account and you were missing $1,000, would you remember where you put it? I would hope so, because you all sat here and nobody knows until now. What would have happened if that audit didn't take place? How many more years would that money have sat there? And are we going to get that money back, and are we going to get it back with interest? And please, cash your check, because I pay $350 in gas money to transport my child every month to school that Goffstown is not paying. That is money out of our income every month. And if anybody needed tax relief, we sure as hell did. And we're paying it every month, and not one of you in this board has stood up to do anything about it. I am paying over $350 a month in gas alone to transport my child. We are putting in 2.5 hours a day of travel. And we expect that we will be reimbursed for the money that you people did not give us in our tax relief. We expect our money, and we expect to be cut a check, because we have a right to that money. The people, the older people that want to move, they paid that money. The money should go back to the people who paid in the funds. And I am very disappointed in all of you.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any other further comment? Go ahead. Something I didn't point out when I went over the rules is also public comment is the public's time to weigh in and to share what they think. It's not a time for an exchange. It's not a question answer. It's a time for you guys to come and tell us what you think.
Okay, well, I had a question, so I guess probably I shouldn't comment then.
Do you have, yeah, it's not a time, but definitely let us know what you think.
Can you state your name, please?
My name is Karen Hawk, and I live at 9 Mountain Road in Goffstown, New Hampshire, obviously. But, okay, I'll come back if you open the floor again to ask my question.
We typically don't, but
This is your time to put your
this
question.
is.
Okay, then I would say, yes, people are angry. I'm not really angry. I'm a little bit disappointed. But could you help me as a layperson understand, like, where did it get lost in the shuffle? Like, how did it get over here and nobody knew it was there? Because I don't think it was just a bank account. I think there was obviously a series of papers, but how did it get from where it should have been to over here? And I think without understanding how the money just got misplaced, there's gonna be a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. And I just really want to know, as a layperson, what was the layout that it just got kind of pushed aside?
Okay, thank you.
You want to have a question, please?
No, I can try to respond to that a little later.
Good evening. My name is Jill Calvo, and I live at 15 Shirley Park in Goffstown, New Hampshire. And I recently read in the Union Leader that there was $9.1 million, I believe, that was overfunded to the board. I want to applaud Superintendent Bach for hiring an independent auditor. I don't understand, and I'm ignorant to the budgets of this town, why an independent auditor isn't hired every year for checks and balances. And I guess the elephant in the room, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I'm wondering how this $9.1 million is going back to the taxpayers. Okay, and then my other question would be, if you're going to tell me that the school board is going to be the decider on when or how this money is going to be allocated or returned, I don't think that's morally right for the people that were withholding the money in the first place. So those are my questions for this board to ponder.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? Last chance? Oh, got somebody.
My name is Richard Palazzolo. I live at 80 Shirley Hill Road, Goffstown. Yes, indeed, I'm angry about the $9 million plus. I would like to know before I leave here, and I'm not staying all night, I would like to know what the board's plan is to either refund us or bring our taxes down or whatever it is. As you know or may not know, we already got hit with a tax increase at the last moment this year, which makes it just that much more pleasant. And indeed, has the money been spent or is it just sitting someplace? And if you guys could just answer those questions, then we would have a better feel for what's really going on. I mean, if you allot in a budget blank amount of money to be spent for like books, let's say, and let's say it's $50,000, and you spend 60, you know, is that where the money went? Where did the money go if it's not sitting there in a bank account? That's what I believe the taxpayers of this town would like to know. I mean, don't want to belabor it, don't want to point fingers, just want a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Going once? Okay, public comment is closed. So moving on to our standing committee reports, policy review.
Policy review met last Monday. We spent our time continuing the work on the athletics policies and the athletics handbooks. We're moving along, making good progress, and the goal is still to have them before this board sometime in the spring.
Okay.
Other than that, we have a meeting, our next meeting is January 29th, 2018, at 5:30 at the SAU.
Thank you. PNC?
PNC did not meet this month. Our tentative next meeting is in January, but because of the change of the dates for this first of the month, it's to be determined with meeting.
Okay. Thank you. CNA?
Our meeting, we discussed the DHS and MVMS athletic handbooks, both the coach and the student. And the review took our whole meeting. Kevin Farley and Steve Fountain, the AD, were both present. The revised handbooks are to be presented at our January 29th meeting to be reviewed again and to be recommended. Some of the feedback of our committee was to add the evaluation forms to the coach handbook, add page numbers to make them easier to understand and flip to. And review the homeschooler participation. Some items are not our current practice, so they need to be looked at. And we're going to look at the homeschool regulation and policies, and we're sending them back to PRC for their review to get us up to date and then look at them again. And our next meeting is January 29th at 7 p.m. at the SAU.
Okay, thank you. All right, Budget Committee. Budget Committee has not met since this board met last. However, since this situation with the audit findings, I have been in close contact with Mike Smith, who is, of course, the chairman of the Budget Committee. They do have their public hearing scheduled for January 9th. Of course, they very well may be calling an additional Budget Committee meeting depending on what happens with this board as it pertains to determinations with the audit findings. I've been considering having a public hearing as well. So depending on where we go moving forward will dictate if the Budget Committee will call another meeting before public hearing. Okay. A&F?
Administration and Finance met this evening, and the result of that is a unanimous motion that I'd like to make to bring to this board that we approve a manifest in the amount of $2,001,773.06.
So I have that motion.
2,001,773.06.
All right, I've got the motion. Do I have a second? It's by Heather. Details, please, Dan.
Well, we've got payroll, taxes, and benefits for 12/7, the month of December for medical and dental, the contributions for New Hampshire Retirement System, TSA Consulting withholdings for 403B contributions, that totaled $1,583,162. We have 2 sped activities, $5,000 and over for vendors. CORE Vocational Services, November 2017 for 1 student, $6,961. The Valley Collaborative for $5,729. October Services, 1 student. General expenses, payments of $5,000 or more to any single vendor. Dead River Company, they provide the propane for all the schools, $14,417. Eversource Power for Bartlett, $2,291. The town of Goffstown gets $7,000 for the quarterly sewer charges for the Goffstown High School. The Ford pickup truck, $35,841 from Grapponi. O'Sullivan Flooring, we talked about the new gym floor. This is another payment, $14,336. Performance Food Service for food supplies, $9,215. SAU 19, the December assessment, $153,680. Superior Fire Protection, $6,400, where we sprinkled some sprinkler work at the Bartlett Maple Ave, the new modulars. Supply Works, which are our buildings and ground supplies throughout the district, $7,549. And Wally Computer for the modular projection systems here at Maple Ave, $9,948. Student activity funds payments, $34,100 for U.S. Integrity Touring.
And just as a quick reminder that that is actually not an expense that.
It's not an expense of the school district, but it was brought out from a previous audit, which we have done every year, that it would be best if this group would review those expenditures.
Okay. Any other questions? Heather, you're all set? Did I see your hand?
No, I don't.
Oh, I apologize. That's okay. Seeing no questions, all in favor of approving the manifest as presented?
Aye.
We're unanimous, thank you. Anything else, Dan?
No, we discussed a little bit about some of the options, given the current state we are in with finances, and I believe the superintendent's going to talk about those in his report or elsewhere on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. That does bring us to the superintendent's report.
Just wanted to confirm our deliberative session for Saturday, February 3rd, or we could have it Saturday the 10th. I would recommend the 1st in case we had, the first date that I presented in case we had inclement weather. We have a very narrow window of time, so I would recommend Saturday, February 3rd at 10 a.m. here at the high school in the auditorium. So we will need to take some action if the board is agreeable to that date.
Yeah, we need to know that now, so that is taken care of.
And what's our suggested snow time, snow date, then
Snow
following
date,
Monday?
That would be the Monday meeting.
The 5th.
Yep.
Yep, that would work.
Are we all in agreement?
Yeah, do we need a motion?
Please do.
I'd like to make a motion. We have the school deliberative session on February 3rd, 2018, in the Heber Auditorium here at the high school.
At 10 a.m., please.
10 a.m.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Stephen. All in favor?
Aye.
We're unanimous. Thank you.
And my last thing, I just wanted to congratulate the special education department here at the high school. They had what's called an Indicator 13 on-site. This is when the Department of Education comes in and does an analysis of our high school special education programming around transition for students with disabilities. And they received 100% compliance for all the files reviewed. So there were, I think, 3 members from the Department of Ed that came and did that analysis, and the high school did a really nice job, so we were proud of that.
Great.
And that's all I have.
That's all you have? All right, thank you. So this brings us to some old business, specifically the draft warrant article discussion. Of course, as we move forward, this may change, but in front of you is the warrant, or the proposed warrant, in its current state.
We do not have the current budget as we sent it to the budget committee. Do we have that number?
We'll add that in. And really, Diane, it might make sense to defer.
It makes sense to table that
Yeah.
until we move forward. Can I get a motion to table this?
I move the table,
Okay.
the discussion on the warrant articles.
Dan, second by Ginny. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So moving forward to the audit review discussion. As board members know, of course, it had been brought to our attention during a regular audit that there was a certain amount of cash that was inappropriate to have accumulated. We hired the forensic auditor, who did indeed confirm. We've been working very closely with the DRA, with the Town Board of Selectmen, Budget Committee to work on some resolutions. We've also met with the DRA. Brian, would you like to go ahead and fill in here?
Sure, and I guess I want to make sure while I'm talking about this that I try to respond to as many of the questions that we had from the floor this evening. So I kept a list, and hopefully I'll be able to comment on all those. First of all, I'd like to say, the board has already heard me say this, but I am incredibly sorry to the community that this has happened. We have an audit every single year done by an independent auditor that comes and does a full presentation to the board, and we have received year after year of clean audits. You can go online and you can watch the presentations on GTV through the on-demand system, and you can see what the presentation from the auditor has been. If we had known that there was this money that had been accumulating, we absolutely would have returned this for tax relief over the last several years. The errors that we identified go back as far as our forensic auditor looked. So they looked as far back as 2007, and in fact, there were reporting errors to the Department of Revenue Administration and to the New Hampshire Department of Education as far back as 2007. From 2007 until 2011, money was accumulated, but at the end of fiscal year 2011, those funds were returned for tax relief. The funds didn't match the audit results, so there were errors and irregularities in the reporting between 2007 and 2011. Beginning in July of 2011, funds accumulated again. a number of accounting errors were made in what was reported to both the DRA and the New Hampshire Department of Education, and that's what's resulted in this accumulation of money. Had we known this, we certainly wouldn't have financed $500,000 worth of modular classrooms at Bartlett and Maple Ave. Had we known this, we wouldn't have emptied out all the money we have for impact fees when we put the new library at Bartlett. Had we known this, we wouldn't have emptied out the 2.5% contingency fund to do the drainage project in the back of Goffstown High School. And can you say, how did you not know the money was in the bank? I've said that over and over. And when we're in a situation where we're running a $60+ million school district across our two towns and the SAU, you rely on certain people, including the business administrator and including the independent auditor every year. So how this has happened really is there's not a great story to tell here, and it's not an easy one to explain. Money was not properly returned because at the end of the year, state forms that were submitted were done incorrectly. And I will tell you that I signed those reports along with members of the school board that we thought they had been properly submitted. The reason those forms were evaluated this year is as we were beginning our independent audit, I asked the auditor to review all state forms because an error was made in the tax rate calculation projection for December of 2017. And likely people are aware of this. We projected the tax rate to be at a certain level, and we were all surprised when the DRA came back with a tax rate that was over $15 per thousand for the school district rate, $15. That's in addition to the town rate, the county rate, and the state school board, the state school tax. At that time, the school board took the action to liquefy $570,000 that they had in the 2.5% contingency fund, which reduced the tax rate from $15.02 to $14.63. The school board did that because we wanted to provide tax relief. Again, we didn't know this money was sitting on the books. And some of the money is sitting in the checking account. Other amounts were in open purchase orders that had never been closed and had never had the money returned to where it was supposed to go. So I hope that gives at least a sense of how this happened. We did have a forensic audit done, and when that final report is done, it would be my recommendation to make that public so that people can see exactly from an accounting perspective what has happened. What I have here in front of me, and I think I have enough copies for all of you here, is a series of options that the school board can consider of what to do with this money. Now that we find ourselves at this point in time, what are the options that we have available to us? So I'll send these around, and like I said, I hope there's enough copies. If not, you can share. If someone doesn't get a copy but would like one, feel free to email me and I'll send it to you tomorrow. Or we could make some available at the SAU office if anyone would like to see this.
And Brian, can I ask you a question?
Please.
Is it ultimately the $9.1 million that was discovered ultimately going to be a complete decision of the taxpayers? They're going to be, because no matter what, if there are warrant articles, the taxpayers would be the ones voting on the warrant articles. And if there were no warrant articles, all the money would have to be reported to the DRA, and that money would just go completely for tax reduction.
That's true. The only piece that I would say is currently the 2.5% contingency fund does not have any money in that. The school board can decide to retain money in that account. That amount is right around $600,000.
Which is the same as about the 570 that we just liquidated.
Exactly, and there's a state law, RSA 189, that governs that. That money can be used for only two purposes. It can be used for tax relief, and it can be used for emergency expenditures, which have to be approved by the New Hampshire Commissioner of Education. So that would be the only money, Dan, that I would see the board having any purview of beyond the scope of the taxpayers. So when we think about this fund, this money came from two different places. It came from an overcollection of revenue. So for example, if the town of New Boston 2 years ago, they sent about 33 students more than anyone had budgeted. That money comes in as revenue. Revenues accumulate to create an unreserved fund balance. That unreserved fund balance, by law, is supposed to be returned at the end of the fiscal year, with the exception of the 2.5% contingency fund, and if the board had authorized any purchases that were identified and were open purchase orders within a period of time. The rest of that money should have been returned. So it comes from the overcollection of revenue, and it comes from an underspend of the general fund. I don't have the detailed numbers at this point of what percentages are what. That could be something at a later point that we have, but right now I don't have that. So a couple questions. How did this happen? I think I've covered that. Independent auditor every year, that is true. We do hire an independent auditor every year. We have a contract with the independent auditor. The independent auditor works directly for the school board. What we did this year was, because there were errors made in the tax rate calculation, I asked the independent auditor to review all state forms. So we have to submit forms such as the DOE 25 as well as the MS 24. Those forms go to the Department of Revenue Administration as well as the Department of Education. I asked the auditor to review all of those forms because I was trying to understand how we made a tax rate calculation error when we were developing last year's budget. When the auditor began to review those forms, now it's important for the public to know that those forms are not part of the school district audit. I can assure you that in SAU 19 from now on, they certainly will be, but they are not typically part of what is audited through this process. That was when the mistakes were noted, and it was identified that the balance sheet didn't match the state forms that were submitted to the DOE and to the DRA. Who will decide what gets done with the money? I think Mr. Cloutier just started that. The board has purview over deposits into the 2.5% contingency fund, which would be, as I said, around $600,000. And any action beyond that I'm going to go through on this sheet would be at the decision of the voters in March. Has the money been spent? No, the money has not been spent, and no unauthorized purchases of any kind were made with this money. So there were no expenditures that were inappropriate. There were no expenditures that were outside of the budget process or anything of that nature. The money is sitting in the bank. There is no money missing. There is no fear that anything inappropriate happened from any kind of a theft type situation. So let me walk through what I have here in front of you. This is a series of 5 different options that the school board can consider. At the top of this is a table. Now, this table is, this is how I base the numbers that I have for tax rate implications. These are the same numbers that the town used in their 2018 budget preparations. So this has a total townwide assessed evaluation of $1,466,065,961. So every dollar of tax money equates to $1.466 million in spending. So those are the numbers I used when I have the tax rate implication projections that you have before you. So let me go through these 5 options. Option number 1, return all surplus money at the end of fiscal year 2018. And right now, absent the voters and or the school board taking any action, this is exactly what's going to happen. This money was not supposed to have been retained, and this money will not be on the books as of July 1st, 2018, period.
And Brian, can I just interject that there is no other legal mechanism to do that? There's no legal mechanism to write a check to each and every homeowner in town. There's no way for that to happen. The legal mechanism is to return for tax relief.
That's what the school district has the option to do.
Right.
So the school district actually has the requirement to do. So at the end of the fiscal year, which for school districts runs from July 1 to June 30th, at the end of this current fiscal year, any monies that are on the books are returned for tax relief. period. So for us in this situation, this value of 9.1 million has a tax implication of a $6.21 reduction in the local school district tax rate. So taxpayers would see this result in the December 2018 tax bill. So on a $200,000 house, that would have approximately about a $1,200 reduction for that type of property. Currently, right now, our tax rate is at $14.63, but that was reduced from $15.02. It's important to remember that the 1502 is actually a reduced number because the school board took the action of liquidating $570,000 from the 2.5% contingency fund, so that artificially reduced the rate to $14.63. So here's what you would have, folks. You're going to go from $14.63, that you're going to then drop to about $8.81, and then the next year, you're going to be back up over 15. So we, and again, this will be up to the board and ultimately up to the voters. The only caution that I would give, and people need to understand, that anytime you save your money for paying your property taxes through an escrow account that you have with your lender, you have to make sure that there are implications that for 1 year that you have a drastic reduction in your rate. Your lender is then going to issue you a refund check. And then they're going to, if you don't intervene, they're going to reduce the amount that you pay the subsequent year, because they typically do it on a 1-year tax rate history. So your rate would drop from $14.63 to $8.81, and then the next year it would go up over $15. So potentially, people who have their money into an escrow account of this nature, they would need to be very cautious that they don't spend money and then are short the subsequent year when their lender says your rate increased from $8.81 to over $15. So this is something that I want people to understand. This is the roller coaster of the tax rate, and this is something that we're trying very hard to balance transparency, returning money for tax relief, and as well as making sure that we don't create a hardship on people who are on fixed incomes, people who might not understand how these taxes are collected, and how to work with your mortgage company. So continuing this, the next option, I'll call this option number 2, is the school district can keep a 2.5% of the net appropriation on the books. That's pursuant to RSA 189, and that's about $600,000. As I said, that money can be used for tax relief and for emergency purchases approved by the commissioner. Page 2. Number 3, there are a number of options that the board and or the community could consider in terms of establishing and creating capital reserve funds for very specific identified purposes. So the RSA that governs this is RSA 35. So there are very specific reasons of how you can create money in a trust fund. All money is kept through the trustees of the trust fund. So if there were decisions and there were votes from the community of Goffstown to create and make deposits into any kind of a capital reserve fund, those monies would be sent to the trustees of the trust fund. They keep all the monies and they manage all the monies that are in any type of trust fund that the town has. For example, the fire truck apparatus fund. There's a specific account, and the trustees of the trust fund oversee that account. So the first option under the establishment of a capital reserve fund would be pursuant to RSA 35:1C, which is a non-capital reserve fund authorized. This allows any town, school district, county, or village district to establish a reserve fund for the maintenance and operation of a specific public facility or type of facility. So we could potentially create money into an account that could be used for ongoing building operations that could then result in reductions in the general fund budget. So whereas we can't carry money over for tax relief, This would be an indirect way of creating multiple years of tax relief through the reduction of budgeted monies. Number two, and I've got a scenario on the back that I'll show you a little more about what an option like that would look like. Under RSA 35-1, monies can be identified and can be retained in a capital reserve fund for construction and reconstruction for capital projects. So this could be monies that could be approved items that are on the capital improvements plan. Somebody mentioned roofs could be part of this, facilities repairs, facilities renovations. Number three, a reserve fund can be established for a school district to purchase land for a future use. Number four, reserve funds can be established for individuals with disabilities. So some school districts have created a capital reserve fund where monies can be retained in the event that there are unexpected special education costs that a school district experiences. You can't supplant budgeted monies. There's something that the New Hampshire Department of Education requires called the maintenance of effort, that you have to establish that you're not eliminating money for special education programming through your budget for something of this nature. And then lastly, the fifth reason that a capital reserve fund could be established would be for unanticipated extraordinary legal fees or expenses related to a present or foreseeable litigation. So that would be the last reason that the school board or members of the community could create a capital reserve fund. Option number four, special legislation. This may not be something that's widely known in the public, but you can have your state senator or members of the House sponsor a bill that is unique and specific to a town or a municipality or a school district. So it would be possible for us to create and submit a special bill. Now, the timing of this could be problematic in that the window of time when special bills can be filed, or any bills, has already passed. So in order to be eligible to submit a special bill, it would take approval from the Rules Committee. I have spoken with Senator D'Alessandro, our state senator from Goffstown, and he is ready to work with us if we were so inclined to pursue any type of a special bill. So what some options for that could potentially look like is if the board was in support, you could potentially expand the fund retention for RSA 198:4B. Right now, that's the 2.5% fund. We could potentially look at creating a reserve account similar to the Manchester School District. There's only one school district that has the ability to carry a fund balance. I don't know the history of that, but the Manchester School District gets to do it pursuant to RSA 198B4 Roman 3. And the last option that I would see would be the potential of creating a special capital reserve fund, which would be specifically for tax relief. That is not an allowable reason to create a capital reserve fund, but it could be through a special bill that could be submitted. Again, from my perspective, trying to avoid the roller coaster in the tax rate. So if we can release this money over a few years and it doesn't impact people and their escrow accounts, I think that's important to consider. The last option that I'll bring to your attention would be paying off existing obligations. So what this would potentially look like is monies would be used to pay off existing debt, which would have the purpose of reducing future budgets. So for example, the Goffstown High School bond. The renovation of this building was done in 2001. It was a 20-year bond. Every year, we're paying the better part of $600,000 on that bond. That bond doesn't expire until the end of 2022. We still have, as you can see at the top of page 4, year after year after year of payments in the $600,000 to high $500,000 range. Option B, we currently have a lease purchase that we did for energy improvements, and we still have 11 payments of $167,302.52 for a sum total of $1,840,327. Option C, the elementary modular classrooms that I referenced earlier, we financed $573,000 to pay for those, and we're in year 2 of a 5-year lease with an approximate payment of $126,349 per year. The next chart that you see, this would give the potential review of the board to consider a multiple-year return of the unreserved funds if we pursued something such as the capital reserve fund for ongoing maintenance and operation of a building. So there could be, and again, this is just a scenario that I've put together for the board's consideration. So instead of having a $9.1 million return in 1 year, this returns $2 million a year until it's gone. So this would have the potential for the current fiscal year 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22, that there would be a reduction of approximately $1.36 on the tax rate every year over those years, instead of having a one-time reduction of over $8. So I will say just a few assumptions that I made in this. I made the assumption that the capital reserve fund would be created in the amount of $7,100,000. That's what I used for the table above. This does not include, as I explained, unreserved fund balance comes from 2 places. It comes from the overcollection of revenue, and it comes from the under expenditure of the general fund. Any additional monies that could be available for tax relief would still come from those 2 areas. The $9.1 million is what's in the bank right now. So in the years to come, the reductions could be larger, but it's impossible at this point to speculate or to calculate what those might be. We would need to make sure we work with the Department of Education to ensure if we did something through, for example, a capital reserve fund, we have to establish payments that are made so the Department of Ed can calculate per pupil costs. So if monies are paid out of the general fund versus if they are paid out of a capital reserve fund, we would need to establish with the Department of Ed new parameters to make sure that our per pupil calculations are still done correctly. And just to reiterate, I have said this over and over and over, our schools are among the most efficiently run in this state. We have among the lowest per pupil cost for elementary school, middle school, and high school. So our middle school is about the 4th lowest out of, I think, 67 middle schools in the state for the per pupil cost. So we are running a tight ship, but clearly we've had a number of reporting issues that money should have been returned. So lastly, I would identify that I did not in this model have any changes in the equalized assessed evaluation. The town assumes an annual increase of the overall value of all land in Goffstown every year. I think the town used 0.5%. Typically, the school district has used 0.25%. This table and these numbers didn't assume any change in that. And this would only cover existing costs, no new projects. So when you look at this, this does not include a new roof at Maple Ave. It doesn't include a new septic system at Mountain View or any other capital projects of that nature. So the table that follows on page 5, this identifies all the monies that are in function 2620, which is our buildings and grounds. So every year, there's about $2.5 million that are part of the general operating budget. If the model was recommended and approved by the voters that created a capital reserve fund for ongoing building operations, approximately that amount could be reduced from the ongoing budget. So that would have the same effect as reducing taxes year after year after year. I would say this has all happened. There's been a lot of information that's come out in a short period of time. I think there would need to be some further vetting of creating this capital reserve fund and or series of capital reserve funds. I do want to make sure we do our homework. We have the opportunity to have this reviewed by legal counsel, etc. And we would need to be careful and be mindful in our area tuition agreement with the community of New Boston. We would need to identify if monies were removed from the general fund that they would still be billable amounts per the area tuition contract. So for example, if we reduce, Goffstown High School has about $988,000 in the budget for function 2620. So that includes everything from propane to electricity to custodial staff, supplies, equipment, et cetera. If $988,000 was removed from the general fund, we would need to be careful that we're not subsequently reducing the tuition that then is billed to the community of New Boston. That's something that would need further exploration. I would add 3 more next steps, and then I would ask if there are any questions. This has been a lot of information. I would recommend further research and investigation into any of these options that I've presented or any other options that board members or members of the community may have. I think we need to make sure we do our homework and we do our due diligence. Number 2, Mrs. McCarthy already mentioned this, but I would recommend holding a public hearing to give the opportunity for feedback and for any members of the community to weigh in as to what type of options, either the 5 that I presented this evening, or if there are others that community members may have. And then number 3, I would recommend releasing the forensic audit when the final report is received. We have not received a final report of that, but when we do, that would be something that I would expect, or at least my recommendation would be to make that public. It's a lot of information. Any questions I can answer, any clarification I can provide?
Go ahead, Dan.
I don't mind starting. Let's talk about option number 2 for a moment. Holding a public hearing.
Yep.
From what I understand, the Budget Committee is meeting on January 9th. And any warrant article that this body would want to put forward that has any funding on it would have to have a public hearing prior to a deliberative session. And if we don't get it done by January 9th, the Budget Committee would have to, well, wouldn't have to, they would have to vote and say, we're going to have another one because we would have been late. So we have a very brief period of time to hold a public hearing on some of these options that we might be able to take prior to actually moving them forward.
Yeah, we have to move.
Okay.
You know, I mean, that's the situation we find ourselves in with timing.
Yep.
The timing of all of this coming down is, it's tight, it's important. We need to make sure that we give this the thought that it deserves. It impacts a lot of people. We want to make sure we're making the best decisions we can make in the best interest of the community. We need to get this done before, I want to get this done before public hearing. I want to give the Budget Committee as much time as we possibly can to consider, to vet, to ask questions. Certainly we want to know that we're all on the same page.
So as a follow-up question, if we put any money on a warrant article and the warrant article would not pass, for instance, if we said we want to put some money here and the taxpayers say no, that money would end up in unreserved fund balance, which means it would automatically go for tax relief.
There we go.
Correct.
Yep.
So absent the voters approving any type of capital reserve fund or working through the legislature to have the Senate and the House approve and then the governor ultimately sign a special piece of legislation, the default position would be all the money goes back, which is basically option number 1 at the end of June 2018.
I'm going to go to number 3 just real quickly because it's on my mind. Any report done by the auditors has always been a public report, and we've always released that anyway. Would there be anything different in this report that would fall under an exemption of 91A that would not make it public? Do you know?
Having not seen the report yet, I'm not entirely sure.
But if it's all about the public numbers, because as far as I can tell, there were no accounting errors made. What appears like is there were some misreading or misstatement of numbers on reports that went to the DRA and the DES. All the accounting office, that's why the audit report looks so good, because the accounting office did a great job accounting for all the money. And that's why the money's all there. But just getting the wrong numbers on a report is creating this well, I was gonna say catastrophic, but this very large thing we gotta do.
It's a situation.
And it's important to remember, the school district cannot retain these funds.
Right.
So that was not made, that was never part of the audit presentations.
Right, because in fund accounting, you get the permission from the voters to spend a certain sum of money, and then you have estimated revenues, and so the difference is what gets raised by taxes, and then you have the actual money that comes in, and the actual expenditures get spent, and those two match up together, but you still have to have the estimated revenue and the actual revenue match up.
Reconciled.
And the permission of the voters, called appropriations, and the expenditures match, all those monies have to mishmash and go on reports to the DRA. And that's what wasn't done correctly.
Precisely.
Okay. Sticky wicket.
Yep.
Any questions from the board in terms of what I've identified here as options for your consideration?
Yeah, I had asked before regarding a legal fund, if we have an estimate for what might be appropriate and prudent.
I don't know. I think that would take some exploration and some research that we certainly haven't had time to do yet.
Okay, I'd like to ask that gets done. I think we need those answers in order to make an informed decision. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay.
Two questions on potential attorney fees.
I'm not talking fees, I'm talking a fund to cover any outcome.
Attorney charges?
No, if there were rulings,
Rulings?
yeah, so
Liability?
liability, cover a liability situation.
Oh, that's different.
Yeah, that's two different things. We
Yeah,
need to make
yeah.
sure that the current budget is appropriately accounts for anticipated costs, and then what we're talking about is
If we
any
get
coverage of
sued
liability.
for
Yep.
some reason and the school district would have to make payments?
Yep.
Okay. Wow.
It's something that needs to be considered.
Well, and it's as simple as, think about someone who sold their house 3 months ago. If
Right.
they were in a situation that they paid into this over collection, they now no longer live here and
Right.
aren't going to benefit from option 1 through 5.
Right.
So that type of liability exposure is, I think,
Yes.
what Diane is talking about.
So do we know if this kind of thing happened anywhere in New Hampshire before, where we can gather some information of how that district may have handled the situation?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
When we met with the Department of Revenue Administration, we asked that question, and they did not have anything comparable that they could point to.
Because it would be great if
Oh,
they did, but
so-
no.
It's like throwing a dart at a dartboard that's 100 feet away. We have no experience in order to, so what would our be suggestion who would we ask?
Primex.
Okay.
That would be a recommendation.
Okay.
So Primex is our property liability insurance carrier, and they had already been notified of this.
But they might have insight.
They might,
Okay.
they might.
Does anyone have anything else? So again, we have a lot in front of us, and it's important that we weigh all our options and give this significant consideration. But we do not have a lot of time.
And especially if we were interested in pursuing the special legislation option, I would say that that needs to be started immediately, just because the deadline had already passed, and the ability to file a bill would need to be approved by the Rules Committee. So if that was something in this list of options that the board is interested in exploring more, we would need to notify our senator and our reps immediately.
Do you have anything?
No, on that piece, I would just say, that's not my preference, to go the legislative route, for a number of reasons. It's hard to predict the likelihood of success of getting something through, but also, I think it makes sense to have this community decide what happens. So have, give options to Goffstown voters so they decide what happens.
I agree.
And I think we're gonna really have to do some educating so that people don't just vote in an angry way, but vote because they really understand what's in front of them and what the implications of voting for this or this or this, so that they're voting for things that are helpful to them and not just an angry vote because they're angry because this happened. So I think really you have to do some educating so people understand what the impact of their vote is going to be to them in the long run. And I think that's gonna be really important, that they really understand what's in front of them and what it's going to mean to them later. And I think that's gonna be hard to do in the cross-section of the whole town, so that everybody understands what it means when they look at the ballot.
I think the truth of it is, none of us are happy this happened.
I'm certainly not.
I'm not happy that this happened at all. But I think that the next piece of it is it's important that we keep our heads level and focus on what is before us and what needs to be done and what the impact and how to properly manage this. We have to keep our focus.
And help people understand what it means, that there are things that we can do and there are things that we just can't do, even though we'd like to help them out the best that we can. There are laws and things that have to be done and can't be done, and so there are steps that have to be done, and they need to understand that, please let us explain to you and listen, so that it can come out to the best options for them.
Dan?
I think there was one more question or one more comment during public comment that I want to bring out and talk about just real quickly. When we met with the DRA, when you guys met with the DRA,
Yep.
there wasn't anything, they said, oh, just go ahead, write some checks and give it back to the taxpayers.
Right.
It's got to go through the unreserved fund balance process, which means it's the fund that's in the bank at the end of June, and then it gets into the December tax rate.
Right, that's what I was referencing when I interjected Superintendent Balke's initial, when he began.
Okay.
Because of course, that's
We
one of
don't
the
have an
things
option.
you think about, right?
Right.
Like,
Let's just
okay,
return the money.
here. And when we met with the DRA, there is no, that is not legal to do. There's no legal mechanism to do it. The only mechanism that we have to do it is by returning it for tax relief as of July 1st for December tax bill. There is no other mechanism.
So would it be fair to say, if we took it out of the Goffstown hands and put it in the legislature could do it? But we already kind of said, I know, I said I didn't like that idea, but a law could do that. I just want to put it out there because that's one of the things, which means we have to go to the Rules Committee, or they do. And it's not my preference. I just wanted to speak it out in case someone thought about it, and.
No, a
that's-
law could do it.
Yeah, a law could do it, but
As
it's.
other laws.
Right.
The laws are what we're bound by. The laws are what say
But
you
then-
can and cannot do
right.
and what must be done.
Then 393 non-Goffstown representatives could potentially affect us.
And chances are it's not gonna happen in time to be
Yeah.
effective
It's just the process,
either.
it's
I
only
think-
the process that I'm more
I think
talking
difficult,
about.
but not impossible, but difficult for sure. And it definitely would, we're up against a lot of timelines here. And,
Yes.
and again, remember, the default position is gonna be number one. So if either the special piece of legislation didn't happen, or couldn't get concluded, or wasn't supported by the governor, ultimately,
It just goes back.
it just goes back.
Right, and in the meantime, we have before us some options, like you look at paying off the high school bond. Do we take an action that saves the town $410,000 in
Well,
interest?
Let me amend that a little bit,
Or-
because we made the payment. The 2016-17 payment was
That's done.
made, and we made the 2017-18 payment in July. We already made the $590,000. So the next payment is in the current budget. The $580,000 is in the current budget with the $81,975, which would be due, we usually write the check on July 1st.
Yep.
And so if I take and just use the last four, that's $1.69 million. But if we paid that $1.69 million along with what's currently in the budget, we could save $107,737. That's almost a no-brainer for me to present that to the taxpayers and say, do you want to save $107,737? Vote for this, we'll pay off the bond. But you would pay for it over the next 4 years in little increments, or you can pay it now and save $107,000
Now, the only disclaimer I would give with those three options
approximately.
for,
Is
for
it-
number 5, paying off existing obligations.
Yep.
We were scrambling to pull all the numbers together. What we did not have the time to do was evaluate the contract, evaluate the terms of the loan.
And whether we can prepay them.
I just want to put it out there that
Okay, no,
I
fair
can't
enough.
say for sure.
Fair enough.
Because we just looked at the amounts.
Can we
Okay.
So,
talk
so for
concept?
the,
We need more
Conceptually,
information, yeah.
with the rest of the information, conceptually, we could offer that to the taxpayers as a warrant article and let the voters decide.
And that was the point I was going with,
Like
is
it.
we can put this in front of the voters and say, do you approve or do not? They say no, majority says no,
It just goes back.
it just goes
Yeah, and
back.
that's the beauty of it, if you want to think about it, because the normal process
So-
is it goes back for the December tax rate adjustment anyway.
Okay,
And so,
so what we need at this point, we need more information.
but I guess what I'd like to do is if the board could say what you're interested in learning more about and what you're not interested, so I can focus my efforts. I think I've heard overwhelmingly the creation of special legislation sounded like an option that might not be worth exploring.
No, but
I'm not interested in it.
paying down the debt so we can
Yeah.
save interest
Yeah.
Now,
seems smart.
so is the board interested in just the high school bond or all three of those? So that would be the high school bond, the Honeywell Phase 2 energy project, and the modular classrooms,
All three, please.
all three.
If I can, the Honeywell Phase 2, we can probably get some more, but from my recollection,
I don't think it's gonna be a lot.
it's not gonna be a lot. There was an imputed interest, there wasn't a stated interest. When they gave us and they said, these are your payments, it wasn't like we were borrowing money. What we did is we authorized a 10-year project where they guaranteed, they put stuff in here, and the money that we were spending on energy, we would pay them that money, and our energy costs would drop below what that was. So it was an overall
Yeah,
savings.
was
And they may have imputed some interest in their calculation, but I don't think there's anything in the contract that says, if you want to pay it all up front now, this is your savings. It's worth,
We
Well,
will
see,
review it.
that's my issue, is we don't have the information.
Okay.
And until I
Okay.
want to know what we're looking at.
sure, and there is
Accurately.
interest. There's interest on
Yeah,
modular
there is.
classrooms,
and it-
absolutely.
And
We
it,
just did
and
that.
it is 11 payments of
Yeah.
$167,302.
Yeah.
We still owe them $1.8 million.
Yep.
So we do need to look at that one too, because it's a lease, not a loan. So whether or not you're able to pay early and actually save money, you may or may
That's
not
it.
be able to do since it's a lease.
Yep.
Yeah, we don't have
Yeah.
the information we need to make a decision. Okay.
Where was-
Do we have anything else on this right now?
Well, I can tell you, I'm not in favor of taking maintenance out of the budget. And that was one in here that talks about, $2.5 million. Set money aside, reduce it
Yep.
here. I'd rather just call it money to reduce the tax rate and let the budget be the budget.
The problem, and the only reason that I made this scenario the way that I did is because if we could create a capital reserve fund exclusively for tax relief, I think that that would be a very responsible thing for the board to consider. It's not one of the ways that we can create a capital reserve fund without special legislation. So the only, what I was trying to do there, again,
Okay.
this was just about how to, instead of having the one-time tax rate reduction followed by subsequent increases and the whole roller coaster on the tax rate, that was the only reason I looked at this, was it was a way, I tried to come up with as many creative ways
okay.
as
So-
you could possibly have to consider how to get this money back for tax relief, but to do so in a way that didn't have a one-year cliff that people fall off, and then the next year have to come out of the cliff.
And that's the trick. I mean, it's wonderful to see the taxes go down. That's great. It's the rebound that
Well,
is
in-
going to be
in-
brutal, particularly as it pertains to escrow.
And my fear would be the very people who seem to know the least about this are going to be the people who are affected the most. And this absolutely would create hardships on people.
I don't want to see people lose their homes because their escrow's messed up. I really don't.
And we could certainly work with the town to try to get information out. We could try to have some resources and tools available for folks to manage their mortgage company, their lender, their escrow account, et cetera. But I think out of a community of, almost 19,000 people, it's going to be hard to get information out to that many people.
And I mean, it's something that, again, if we do go this route and offer choices and they get voted down, and again, the money goes back to tax relief, that may still be happening.
Yep.
That's realistic.
Yep, I would agree.
Diane?
Yeah, go ahead.
What would that do for somebody who sells their house when the tax rate is low? I mean, wouldn't the buyer be unaware,
Mhm.
and then the next year it would go back up?
Unless by some grace, they were looped in, there was some social connection in place where the realtor was in the know. Yeah, be kind of surprising to buy a house with such a low tax rate and then the next year, and not realize that correction is gonna come.
Imagine what it says on all of those for sale online things. Tax rate, lowest in New Hampshire with a high-quality schools. Oh, good golly. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, maybe I got confused. There was no way to create a capital reserve for the specific offset of taxes outside of the 2.5%.
So, nope.
Now I understand the creativity. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to go
Okay.
for
Yep,
on
yep.
the options for the special legislation. It would be
Yeah.
to expand the 2.5% fund, allow us to create a reserve account like Manchester has, or to create a capital reserve fund just for tax relief. But again, those would all be special legislation.
Okay.
Here's a problem I'm bumping into. We do not have enough information to make a decision tonight, in my opinion. We have questions.
I agree.
But again, we are backed up, obviously, time, we have to move. So what's going to happen? I'm going to have to call a special meeting at some point
Yep.
within the next couple weeks.
Just like everybody else, I think we need to make a thoughtful decision on this and not just look at it tonight and make
It's
a
a big deal.
decision as well. Yeah.
And it impacts a
I
lot of
definitely need
people.
more time to think
Okay.
and-
Is there anything else on the list that the board would like to see removed from consideration? I mean, It would allow me to focus my efforts more if we know very specifically what you're in support of and what you're not in support of.
I'm on board that the special legislation would be not something I'm interested in.
So you just said number 4, you're not interested, right?
Okay, so 4's off the list?
I think so.
I agree.
It takes the Goffstown voters out.
What about the series of capital reserve funds?
The RSA 35
Yep.
list? 3?
Yep.
I think they're all worth thinking about. That's in my opinion.
Brian, would that be a cumbersome process in terms of using funds that are in a CRF for bills that come due on a daily basis like that?
I would imagine that if we worked with the trustees of the trust fund, that we could find a way to make it work from a logistical perspective. And it would be, again, so the model that I suggested was the possibility of about $2 million coming out of that function 2620. We would have to have a way that through the budget process, that account, those accounts, that function would be zeroed out. So our budget would not show any spending activity. We would then receive money from the trustees of the trust fund, and we would deficit spend those accounts. $2 million is a lot of money, but we'd have to see if we could work with them on what that would look like in terms of the release. I think it's worth exploring. Again, I don't know if people will necessarily understand that what you're trying to do is return the money over 4 years or 5 years and still provide tax relief as opposed to a one-time tax reduction.
Right, to smooth out the.
Right. The whole point of exploring that was to create something that's level and linear and reduces it until the money's gone.
I guess I just wanted to make sure that practically speaking, that was something we could make work before we spent too much time thinking about it.
Yeah, I find myself thinking about it, so it's still worth leaving it on the list so that we can think. But you're right, it's the practicality of doing that. In my mind, it's just racing now to see if there was special legislation that did not necessarily take the Goffstown voters out of the mix, meaning if a special legislation, and they have supported these kind of specials in the past and have usually gone quickly through the House and Senate, and if we get support from the governor, something that would say, give the Goffstown voters a one-time option to be able to create a capital reserve fund for the purpose of smoothing out their 9.1 million unreported unreserved fund balance.
Exactly.
Something of that nature. That legislation would be due, which means if they did it in January, we could still get it onto the warrant.
So that would be a great example. If we were legally allowed to present the voters with an option to create a capital reserve fund exclusively for tax relief,
Yeah.
with a schedule of how that would be paid down.
Yeah.
That would be,
It would still put it back in the hands of the Goffstown voter.
it sure would.
It's a big undertaking, though. It's a big undertaking.
It is, but you know what? Senator D'Alessandro's a big boy. He's been there a long time, and he's already said, from what I understand, that he's willing to take this on for us, if that's something. But unfortunately, we don't have a week or two to think about that, to ask him to draft and move forward. We would almost have to think about that relatively soon. And I
But-
just thought of it now, and I kind of like it, but it's still fairly new in my mind.
So the three options that I saw for special legislation, one would be to expand the 2.5% retention. So that would allow the board to do that.
Yeah.
the reserve account, which again would be creating something similar to the Manchester School District, but the creation of a capital reserve fund could go on the ballot. We could seek special legislation for the opportunity to present it to the voters.
I don't like the first two because even though it gives the Goffstown voters, it still puts it in our hands. I don't want to put it in our hands. I want to put it in the voters' hands, so I would like to see something certain. So if there was something in a warrant article that says, this is what's going to happen every year, you know, this is the money that has to be returned. If we increase our 2.5% to something different, that means this board has to sit here and vote how much to do for tax relief. And I'd rather not.
Unless you established a schedule or something of that nature.
Exactly,
But
and it would have to be a legally binding schedule.
Right.
Which means that the taxpayers, when they vote for it, would know exactly what's gonna happen. So maybe the special legislation isn't totally gone.
But for option 3, not 1 and 2.
Correct.
Is that what I'm hearing?
But then what do we do if that doesn't get passed?
The money goes back to the taxpayers right away.
For?
Tax relief in December of 2018.
Okay.
It just goes.
I was gonna say, make
That's
sure you
the
define
default.
right away.
Right,
because-
and that's the decision. They would decide, do I want to stop this thing, okay, which will create all kinds of unknown havoc, or do I want to just have it dip down and stay down there and then come up? I don't want to make the decision for the Goffstown taxpayers. I think it's their decision. And this might just be something else. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. They still have the other option, and the money goes back. But I guess my intent is trying to put as many options in front of the taxpayers as possible to see what the voters want to do, and just not, because if we sit here and do nothing, the money is going back, and there's gonna be an almost $7 reduction in the tax rate. And everybody's gonna go, woo-hoo, on December 1st, when they get their tax bill. But it's gonna be a
Panic
lot of
afterwards.
pain in about 11 months after that.
So are you saying put like multiple warrant articles on?
Well, for that particular item, it would only need one warrant article with a
Right.
specific schedule.
But that's one choice.
Right.
Yes.
And if that one choice is gone, it's gone, and
There could be
There's
other
no
warrant
other
articles
choi-
on
that's
there
what
as
I'm
well.
asking.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that you do this, you do that. And from my discussions in the past with Jamie Dowd, who is our Department of Revenue person who actually bills the tax rate, if I recollect correctly, and that's why I'm looking up at the ceiling, she said, depending on the order of the warrant articles, and if they all have funding, and for instance, if there was so much funding and the warrant articles had more funding than what was available, it starts to fund them at the top and works its way down. So if the taxpayers, if this board were to say, hey, I want this article, this warrant article, and those amounted to, let's say, $2 million, and then the last one said, let's put the whole $9.1 million back so that the voters had the total authority. But if all the majority of the voters said they like those three and there's only $7 million left, even though the $9.1 million passes, there's only $7 million to fund it, and that's okay too. I know that got confusing. I don't know if I can say it better differently.
And I can't imagine if it's confusing
Yeah.
to say, I can't
Yeah,
imagine
I
that's
just heard
gonna be
myself
any
and it got
clearer.
confusing, but.
Well, it's like you have money in your wallet, and you're gonna go, and you're gonna buy this item, this item, this item, and this item. And if, by the time you get to number 4, you don't have the full amount, that's all you have to spend.
Makes sense.
Right, and that's.
That's all
what
you
they
have
would do.
left.
And they would put what, even though the warrant article had a certain number on there, it
The warrant
doesn't-
articles are required to have a some certain
even though the
some
warrant
certain
article
amount.
said something, by the time you get there, whatever's left over, it just doesn't go away because you don't have the total because the taxpayers agreed to other items. Whatever's left over gets funded, and that matrix would level out. It would have something like saying, for the next certain number of years, this is how much you take what's in there, you divide it by those number of years, and that's what goes for tax relief.
Well, it could almost be like that table on page 4, but instead of
Yes.
it being instead of it being used to manage facilities and building operation, it would just be $2 million return, reduction of $1.36 on the tax rate. And it's 2 million, 2 million, 2 million, 2 million, and then whatever's left.
Right. Because we will have earned interest over those years, and so
You know, I still think it's a stretch.
it is a stretch, but
And I'll think about that option more, but at this moment, I'd rather see us invest our energies in making some targeted and well-thought-out recommendations to the voters. Hey, we've identified this as something we think is wise and to the benefit of the town to appropriate the funds to. Do you agree, yes or no? And then if it fails, it goes back. You know, and we're talking about putting it in the hands of the voters. I really am more comfortable currently trying to iron out a few options for them to allocate and approve or disapprove. And if they disapprove, it all goes back. If they approve, then we take this step, we set up this capital reserve fund to manage this expense. The effort what has to happen to get special legislation, I'd really rather see us focus on what we're doing here and now, with the idea of making recommendations and handing it to our people here locally.
so
In March.
here's what I see as a comparison.
Mhm.
There's only one recommendation we can do to offer to the taxpayers. Do you want tax relief over a period of time? One is either by manipulating the actual budget. And so when the budget goes before the voters, they see was it $1 million?
$2 million reduction.
A $2 million reduction, and how confusing would that be versus a piece of legislation that said, that's for tax relief? That's kind of like where I was coming from with my idea. How do you get a $2.5 million reduction here, because it's not gonna be seen, it's not gonna be part of the tax calculation, it's gonna be a talking point. So you remember 3 years ago we did that? Versus the budget is now grown overnight in 1 year, a minimum of $2.5 million in the final year. That's where
I mean, it's entirely likely we're going to have other warrant articles if we need to establish
Sure.
a capital reserve for legal. We have got to get that information. We would be
Totally
remiss
agree.
otherwise.
Totally agree.
So until we have the whole picture, which we don't have this evening, we are not able to make an informed decision.
Would it be worth saying that, let's put them on, these are the things that we would like to do, not take that one off, but say if we got some time to follow up with this, that it's still on the list we could do, rather than just saying it's completely gone? I mean, if we get to it, we get to it. If we don't have time for it, we don't have time for it. That's, I mean, so that we don't completely, and if there's something that I can help doing with my view of what's happened in legislation over the years, I'd be certainly willing to do what I can to assist in that endeavor.
All right. I think we've beaten this pretty good. Does anyone have anything else to add before we move on? All right. Seeing that, let's move on to notifications. Brian, do you have your direction clear? The information that we need?
I think so. There's certainly an interest in number 5 on page 3 to establish some type of an estimate of what a potential legal fee obligation could be. There's interest in exploring the 3 debt service options in number 5 of paying off the existing obligations. So we will review those contracts and look at what our options would be associated with those contracts. And I think that's it for me for next steps.
Okay.
If you.
Can you do that in a week, do you think?
Well, we're gonna have to.
Okay. Okay.
We'll have to. If you wanted me to contact Senator D'Alessandro about the potential of special legislation for the creation of a capital reserve fund to be put in front of the voters, it would seem to me that the first step would be to have him seek permission from the Rules Committee. As he explained it to me, that would be the first step, and then we'd have to get draft legislation written. But if you wanted to pursue that, I don't know if it's an option or not. And the senator couldn't say for sure.
Well, again, it's important to know what is or is not an option.
Well, the first thing would be to have them just seek permission, and if they say no, we're done.
Answer.
And if that were the case, I would just be looking at the option that I presented for creation of a capital reserve fund for tax relief and not the other two. Is that the direction of the board?
Give me the numbers on that one again.
So it's on page 3, under special legislation. And again, there could be other ideas here, but these were the ones that I had established. One would be the expansion of the 2.5% fund. The second would be the creation of a reserve account similar to what towns have and the Manchester School District has. And my third was the creation of a capital reserve fund, but it could certainly be to allow the voters to vote on the creation of a capital reserve fund for tax relief with an established payout schedule.
That would be the only one that I would support, the number 3.
I agree with that, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right, so you'll reach out?
I will.
And do more research on that?
I will.
Okay. You're all set?
I am.
Okay, thank you. So we've got some notifications.
So we had, I am remiss that I did not share this, we had a lovely ceremony last week on Tuesday during the horrible weather. We had, what MC, about 30 graduates from our local school district cohort, 29 from Goffstown and 1 from New Boston, who received their master's degrees from Southern New Hampshire University. And we had a very nice ceremony here where they all had their traditional hooding occur, and they were given their diplomas. So most of these folks are all from that group. So we have track changes for Shelley Kaiser, Chris Belding, Leslie Bergagliano, Sandy Fife, Jane LaRoche, Heather Pierce, and Lyle Hamill. Moving from bachelor's 15 to master's, and bachelor's 30 to master's for 2 of them.
Please send them our sincerest congratulations.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So notifications for 2 interns. We have Connor Forsyth, who is an NHTI student who's working with the technology team. And we have Victoria Walder from Endicott College here at the high school in the social studies department. Those are just notifications. And then we have 2 co-curricular notifications for Joseph Mullaney for middle school wrestling volunteer and Randy Lovering, high school basketball volunteer.
They shouldn't be notifications, they should be for approval.
I think those are...
They should be nominations for approval.
I think so.
They certainly could be.
No, they are. They should be nominations.
They're unpaid positions?
They're unpaid.
But we still maintain approval over people working with the kids.
Okay.
What we do?
No, we do. We do. So we have a nomination for Joseph Mullaney and Randy Lovering. I know Randy is known to us. He's got several years' experience.
Yep.
Coaching our kids.
Anything about Joseph that you know?
I can look. Yeah, Randy's a phys ed teacher, and Randy's our varsity soccer coach. Joseph volunteering. He sent his resume in, that he's got a background in wrestling and wanted to be part of the team. I don't have a lot of information beyond that. I believe a UNH student. Oh, no, wait, he was using a UNH email address. Sorry, that's just how he was contacting. He says it's his fiance's address, so not a UNH student.
Does anyone have any
He,
questions?
oh, hold on. He
Go ahead,
was the
thank you.
head middle school wrestling coach a few years back. So he is a known coach to us who apparently left the program and is now coming back on a volunteer basis. Sorry, that wasn't clear.
And Steve has vetted both these?
Steve has.
Okay. Any other questions? Or do I have a motion?
I move that we accept the 2 co-curricular sports notifications as presented.
By Stephen, do I have a second? By Retta, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And then for approval, you also have Maple Avenue needs a para.
We do. We have a request coming forward from Maple Ave School and from the special ed department for a new position of a paraprofessional. Maple Ave Elementary School has a special education student whose unique needs require the support of a paraprofessional. The student's IEP team has determined that paraprofessional support is required to assist with implementation of a behavior plan, as well as prevention and maintenance of safety for the student and school environment. It's recommended that the district approve the addition of a paraprofessional position for 6.75 hours per day, for a total of 33.75 hours per week. The cost of a certified paraprofessional at step 7 with 2-person medical and dental coverage for the remainder of the school year is approximately $20,607. We would look at an anticipated start day of January 2nd, 2018, if the board is able to support this request.
Okay, so they don't currently have a paraprofessional who's.
They do not. This is a student that they need support for.
It's
And
IEP based, you said.
It is.
So we really don't have a choice.
That's
And Brian,
correct.
this comes from the budgeting practice that when we set the budget in advance, we only allocate for paras for
For known-
issues known at the time.
Known students, so any
And-
students who move in, any students who show up on our books. It could be anything from a court placement to a foster situation, any number of things. But none of those students, we don't budget for extra seats. We don't budget for unanticipated special ed needs. We only budget for known students.
Sorry, would this para be one-on-one then?
Yes. So this would be a position that if the board approves it, it would be for the remainder of this school year. And then if this position was needed next year, we would have to come back to you. And at this point, it's not part of the proposed budget.
And that it's IEP based, I will make the motion to grant the paraprofessional position for the rest of the year for this student in Maple Avenue for IEP.
All right, I've got that motion from Jenny. Do I have a
Second.
second by Stephen? Thank you, Dan. Go ahead.
Have any other students who had paraprofessionals assigned no longer in the school district, so there may be additional paraprofessionals available?
There aren't. If we had, for example, if we had a student who moved or no longer required that level of service, those would have been positions that we would have already not filled.
Right, and so what I'm saying is, what we're doing is we're adding a new position, not a new person. And so what I'm asking, are there any vacant positions currently that could be filled because we already have the position?
I don't believe so. And we would need to advertise. We don't have any prospective candidates in the queue, either, from what I understand.
I've got a motion. I've got a second. Do I have any other questions?
So so my vote, if I vote in the affirmative, would be based on a position not being available to fill. Does that make sense? So if we already had a position and we vote this one in and you did not need it, then you wouldn't need to fill it, it wouldn't be overfilled now.
Right.
Okay.
What you're asking is, do we have an extra person in staff who can help?
Not a
who can do
person,
this?
position.
We don't have an extra position.
Okay. Okay. There's no extra, because sometimes positions versus, it's the same thing, appropriation, permission versus actual expending. And what I'm saying is, there's no position that's not filled already.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All set?
Yes.
Anything else? Seeing none, all in favor?
All right.
We're unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so any other business? All right, that being said, we have non-public this evening. We'll be going into non-public tonight for two reasons. One will be under subsection C matters, which if discussed in public would likely adversely affect the reputation of any person other than a member of the public body itself. We'll also be going in under D, consideration of acquisition, sale, lease of real or personal property. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to enter into non-public pursuant to RSA 91A3, Roman 2, subsection C matters, which if discussed in public would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of the body itself.
So moved.
By Dan, seconded by Heather. Roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. All right, we're officially in non-public. Thank you.